This is me, and that's my book. Now, I'm gonna read. You guys just listen up, okay? ठाडो बस्नु पर्यो अलिकति यहाँ 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 ठिक छ Creating lasting change by queuing up the cues. Back when I was trying to learn everything I could about influence, professionals, persuasion practices, I received an invitation in the mail to experience an amazing opportunity to achieve wealth, prosperity, and financial independence beyond your dreams. I was certain it involved some kind of pyra- pyramid scheme, pyramid scheme, which normally would ensure the end of my interest, but because I was curious at the time to learn how its promoters plan to sell the scheme, I called to reserve a place. The most as intriguing aspect of the event for me was its location. Although I and about 50 other individuals ranging from economically interested to desperate came together on a Saturday morning at a Phoenix restaurant. We didn't stay for long. We were escorted onto an aging, distinctively colored yellow and blue bus for 2 hour highway drive to Tucson, where we were told the educational event would be take place. That was a lie. When we got to Tucson, there was no new enlightenment provider. At launch, a speaker just briefly reviewed the points we had heard and the best ride. Why would the program organizers spend good money on such a bewildering journey? By then, I knew the program information was never envisioned for Tucson. It had always been designed for the bus. I was sure I was sure this was true because halfway to Tucson I would looked out my window and observed another aging, distinctively colored yellow and blue bus carrying a load of riders from Tucson to Phoenix. That sight supplied an immediate clarifying epiphany from the start. The organizers had intended to expose us to the details of their wealth program, a pyramid scheme as I would suspected on buses rattling along the road. 13 million people in my house along the road between the two cities. I believe that was the case for a pair of psychologically based reasons. First, it was hard to think hard in that rolling, noisy, bumpy, crowded emotionally agitating environment. And hard thinking is the chief foe of pyramid cell systems. Second, when people can't deliberate carefully, can't concentrate fully, they are much more likely to respond automatically to whatever decision making cues are present in the situation. On our bus, the program organizers controlled those cues. They would been able to fill the space with an array of features that, wherever we looked, set us up to be receptive to wealth-linked slogans were taped to our seatbacks, and success-themed music preceded each new speaker's Speaker's presentation. Songs from the Rocky movies predominated. Eye of the Tiger was a favorite. The speaker's basic message was always some version of "You can do it, you can do it, you can do it, you can do it," provided you use the system. This universal assertion was accompanied by a collection of supportive cues, an expensive, beautifully tailored suite worn by one speaker, and $11,000 commission check. Whoa. From this month alone, waived by another, a glowing testimonial letter read by a third from an individual before starting the program had been just like you folks. By the time we would return to Phoenix, two-thirds of us had signed on. Modern life is becoming more and more like that bus hurtling down the highway, speedy, turbulent, stimulus, saturated, and mobile. As a result, we are all becoming less and less able to think hard and well about what best to do in many situations. Hence, even the most careful minded of us are increasingly likely to react automatically to the cues for action that exist in those settings. So, given the quickening pace, and concentration disrupting character of today's world, are we all fated to be bozos on this bus? Not if rather than racking against the invading automaticity, we invite it in but take systematic control of the way it operates on us. We have to become interior designers of our regular living spaces, furnishing them with features that will send us unthinkingly in the directions we most want to go in those spaces. This approach provides another way besides making immediate forceful commitments to arrange for initially formed preferences to guide our future actions. By assuring that we regularly encounter cues that automatically link to and activate those preferences, we can commission the machinery in our behalf. Previous chapters के धुलोमा के धुलोमा स्पार्लिङमा धुलोमा पनि छ त नि प्रिभियस च्याप्टर्स अनि उयो क्याप्सुलमा पनि छ प्रिभियस च्याप्टर्स गनायो भन्ने मान्छेलाई चाहिँ क्याप्सुल ठिक हुन्छ Previous chapters offered some examples of how we might त्यो मेरो हो त्यो लाइक गर्यौ हजुरको हो हेल्दी प्रडक्ट भन्ने गरेन गर नि त्यहाँनिर कपी लिङ्क गर भाइरल बनाऊ न भाइरल मैले कसरी भाइरल बनाउने गर न मैले भनेको त 5 चोटि कपी लिङ्क गर त कपी लिङ्क गरेर हुन्छ Previous chapters offered some examples of how we might to go about it. कपी लिङ्क गरेर हुन्छ के हो खै उयो फर यु पेजमा जान्छ अरे कि If you want to write in a way that connects with a particular audience, perhaps as you are preparing a report or presentation, surround yourself with cues linked to group. For instance, typical audience members' faces. If you want to approach the task while possessing a strong achievement orientation, perhaps at work, give yourself contact with the image of success, striving and accomplishment such as a runner winning a race. If you want to approach a different task while possessing an analytical orientation, perhaps when figuring a budget, give yourself access to images of contemplation, thoughtfulness, and examination. For example, Rodin's the thinker, and so on. You might even be able to optimize the performance of each of these types of tasks in the same place on the same computer by changing the desktop wallpaper to show a series of images appropriate to whichever orientation you want to apply to a specific task. If when then plans provided another way to harness the power of associative connections for our long term advantage. It's something they do by associating desirable goals and actions with cues that we will experience in regularly occurring future situations. If after my business's launches the server asks for dessert choices, then I will order mint tea when it's 8 in the morning and I have finished brushing my teeth. Then I will take my prescribed dose of medicine. Although each of these suggested tactics is consistent with research presented earlier in this book, there's another worthy tactic that gets to support from research we haven't yet seen on the role of mere reminders. Really, another audio persuasive geographies who we are. किनभने भर्खर 12 मिनट हुँदैछ बल्ल त्यो 12 मिनट भएर के भयो आज फाँफामा सुत्नु न यो त नयाँ च्याप्टर भोलिबाट नयाँ सुरु गरे हुन्छ अब त कति छ 100 कति छ 230 पुग्यो भनेपछि यहाँ कति रहेछ टोटल 384 छ हाम्रो सेसन पढ्न पर्छ पर्दैन हेर्नु पर्दैन 384 हो कि यतिसम्म 94 84 यो चाहिँ इन्डेक्स रहेछ हैन त 394 230 Mr. Ruel, check it out. I'm going to fall. Where you gonna fall? Persuasive geography is to who we are is where we are. Whenever I speak to healthcare management groups about the influence process, I will ask which people in the system are most difficult to influence. Which people in the system are most difficult to influence? The answer is invariably and emphatically physicians. On the one hand, the circumstance seems as it should be. To get to their elevated positions in the healthcare hierarchy, doctors endure years of training and practice, including medical school specializations, internships, and residencies that give them a great deal of information and experience on which to base their choices. 5 million people in my house, making them understandably reluctant to be swayed from those choices. On the other hand, this kind of resistance can be problematic. When physicians don't adopt recommendations for change that would benefit their patients, all of which raises a larger issue. Why do most doctors enter the medical profession in the first place? Is it principally for other serving or for self-serving reasons? Is it to benefit and relieve the suffering of their patients? Or is it to obtain the considerable authority, respect, status, and income that normally accompany the role? Swaying doctors how to wash their hands of a serious problem. In 1847, at Vienna General Hospital, Ignace showed that hand washing by medical practitioners reduced patient infections and deaths. But to this day, many physicians fail to follow proper procedures for hand hygiene. Really, मान्छे 2 घन्टा पढ्छ भन्छ नि र आफूलाई पढ्न कत्रो गाह्रो बानी बसाल्नुपर्छ दिस इज माई डिसिप्लिन हो कि डिसिप्लिन बुझ्यो तिमी सुत्न सक्छौ तिमी तिमी गुर लाएर दिनमा 4 चोटि सुतेपछि निद्रा लाग्छ त दिनमा 4 चोटि 4 चोटि पनि कति सुत्यो भन्न जम्मा 1.5 घन्टा 1.5 घन्टा त हो 4 चोटि सुत्दा त ल 1.5 घन्टै सुत्यो भने कति घन्टा सुत्यो त राति सुत्नुपर्ने टाइम त सुतेरै बितायो तिमीले अब लाग्यो त निन्द्रै अब के गर्नु A study done in a US hospital gives us valuable insight into the issues. The researchers Adam Grant and David Hoffman noted that even though hand washing is strongly recommended before each patient examination, most physicians wash their hands less than half as often as the guidelines prescribe. What's more, various interventions aimed at reducing the problem have provided ineffective, leaving both doctors and patients at greater risk of infection. Grant and Hoffman Hoffman thought they could do better just by bringing physicians' attention upon entering an examination room to one of two powerful motivations: concern for themselves of concern from their patients. To channel attention to the self-centered concern. The researchers placed signs above some examination room soap or gel dispensers that read hand hygiene protects you from catching diseases to channel attention to the patient-centered concern. They placed they placed signs over a different set of dispensers that read hand hygiene protects patients from catching diseases. Despite only a single word of difference, the effect of the two types of signs was dramatically one sided. The sign that reminded the doctors to protect themselves had no effect on soap and gel use, but the one reminding them to protect their patients increased usage by 45%. Oh my god, only one people, zero people? 18 minute भयो त These results afford us important information about a pair of related issues. First, although many other kinds of interventions had failed to reduce the problem, simply drawing doctors' initial attention to the connection between hand washing and patient protection was a notable success. Of course, in the previous instances, when the doctors hadn't washed their hands, a deep concern for patient welfare was no doubt present in them then, too, as was a recognized link between hand washing and patient welfare. What accounts for the difference? In those previous instances, there was nothing there to direct the doctor's attention to the link, to elevate it to top of mind above the other relevant features of the situation. How the patient looks, what the attending nurse is saying, what the case notes are saying, and so on. All it took was one sign visible as the doctors entered, reminding them of the link to change their behavior impressively. Plus, it appears from the study's data that we have an answer to the question of what most physicians are really like deep down. They appear to be other oriented individuals strongly motivated to enhance the well-being of their patients and not of the sort we would have to worry would ever serve their own interest at their patient's expense. Although the first of these conclusions seems correct, a study carried out at Carnegie Mellon University cast doubt on the second. It concerned another practice that physicians have been warned jeopardizes their patients' best interest. Doctors are frequently offered gifts from health industry companies, most notably pharmaceutical firms, but also medical equipment manufacturers, in the form of pizza for their office staffs, lunches and dinners for themselves. All expenses paid trips to conferences, research and consulting contracts, and fees for teaching or speaking at meetings, and even for participating in product related conference calls. The evidence is strong that these gifts and sponsorships influence physicians to return the favors by prescribing or endorsing products that further the welfare of the industry sponsors rather than of their patients. Despite such evidence and accompanying warnings, many continue to accept the present compromising bounty of their positions, even while recognizing its problematic implications. What's going on here? How could it be that physicians would act more on behalf of their patients' interests than their own in the hand washing study? But the reverse seems to apply in the case of gift taking. Maybe it's that hand washing is a relatively small cost at act compared with rejecting industry sponsored benefits, and within such higher value choices, self interest wins out, as it well might in any group of people. Maybe that's true, doctors are people after all. But the rule for reciprocation which states that those who give first are entitled to receive in return, and the findings of the Carnegie Mellon University study offer a less cynical, more textured view. The study of 301 resident physicians in the United States began with pertinent question. No, hello, music, no music. What might cause doctors to become more versus less accepting of industry sponsored favors? No sample of the physicians was simply asked in an online survey whether and to what extent taking gifts and payments from industry representatives was acceptable to them. In the researchers' analysis, only about one fifth to 21.7% found the practice acceptable, but when a second sample was asked the same question, preceded by items inquiring into how much they had sacrificed personally and financially to become MDs, nearly half, 47.5%, third, gift taking acceptable. Finally, when a third sample was both reminded in the same way of their prior sacrifices and asked whether the resources They were previously expanded, justified, taking gaps a clear majority. 60.3% came to see the practice as acceptable. What should we make of those results? Speaking for myself, I have drawn multiple conclusions, including the heartening one that despite healthy, unhealthy is probably the better word here. Minority who third gift taking acceptable. Most physicians found it an unworthy choice. Wherever, however, focusing physicians persuasively on the large inputs they had supplied to the healthcare system made them much more willing to take large returns from it. The result, plus the fact that a reciprocity based rationally caused and majority to embrace gift taking implicates the temporarily surfaced rule for reciprocation as a major culprit here. Lastly, the findings tell me that the answer to the question of whether, as a group, MDs are primarily patient serving or self serving is yes. They are each, depending on their attentional focus at the time. That's a conclusion that applies to far more than physicians who remarkably elastic preferences serve to illustrate how top of mind factors operate on all of us. It's also a conclusion that provides a fitting close to this book. In large measure, who we are there with respect to any choices where we are attentionally in the moment before the choice. We can be channeled to that privileged moment by choice relevant cues we haphazardly have haphazardly bump into in our daily settings or of greater concern by the cues a knowing communicator has tactically placed there, or too much better and lasting effect by the cues we have stored in those recurring sites to send us consistently in desired directions. In each case, the mad moment is persuasive whether we are wary of the underlying process, attracted to its potential, or both. We would be right to acknowledge its considerable power and wise to understand its inner workings. किन 9 बज्यो कहाँ बज्यो त 15 मिनट छ अझै यहाँ अब बल्ल त 30 मिनट्स हुन लास्ट 28 मिनट्स भइरहेछ हो त अनि अब बन्द गरेर त धेरै पढे तिम्रो दिमाग बस्ने एकैचोटि रेफरेन्सेस भनेको के हो बुढी रेफरेन्सेस भनेको के हो के थाहा के थाहा के पढ्यौ त ब्याचलरसम्म तिमीले मलाई थाहा थियो यही भन्नु छ भनेर तर साँच्चैकै थाहा छैन एक्ज्याक्टमा धेरै बेर घोड्छौ क्या तिमीले उयो आज दाँतै माझे छैन ल त्यो लास्टै सेन्सिटिभ भएछ तिम्रो गिजाहरू त पुरै रगत हाफे आछ नि टेलिफोन आइरहेछ टेलिफोन यस्तै यहाँबाट आएछ अस्ति रोकेको थियो अहिले चाहिँ आहा यहाँ आयो के रगत हुन्छ हर्षले यो उस भएबाट आएको मलाई अस्ति धेरै भयो होइन ए 1 महिना कि 2 महिना भएबाट अनि अस्ति बिचमा रोकेको थियो कि अलिअलि आउनु कम भएको थियो पहिलाको भन्दा धेरै कम भएको थियो अनि अहिले चाहिँ फेरि आफै आएको केही नगर्दा नि
यो नोटिस गरेको यो धेरै बहिनी से दाँतबाट आफूलाई हताउनको 2 दिन भयो